Iowa's News Now Sports brings you black and gold glory. Your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
We're 5 games into it. I had no idea how good we were. Still don't. And didn't know about our opponent either. We're both 4-0. But, so that stuff will mean a little bit more in November, but that's also why you play. You want to be in games that matter.
Friday night was a game that mattered, and it couldn't have gone much better for the Hawkeyes, and because of that, they've got one coming up that matters even more. I'm Grant Becker, joined as always by Hawkeye Nation's Rob Howe, and we've got a showstopper coming this week. But before that, we'll break down another monstrous Iowa victory. For the third time in 5 weeks, the Hawkeyes handed their opponent its first loss of the year, and this was the most emphatic thumping yet. Once again, it was an astonishing performance from the Iowa defense. Maryland QB Talia Tungavailoa entered having thrown 1 interception in the first 4 weeks. The Hawkeyes picked him off 5 times. Add in another interception for the Terps' backup QB and a game-changing fumble on a kick return, and Iowa comes away with a staggering 7 takeaways.
We're pretty veteran back with those guys, and then throw Kayvon in there. So it's 5 guys that have played a lot of football. So that helps. And then the other part is, the guys up front are doing a good job.
Really, it was just great execution, preparing all week. Coach Parker, he really over-prepared us. We kind of do that every week. So really, it was just being disciplined, having great eyes, knowing our keys, linemen and responsibility, and, everything else to take care of for itself.
It's fun. It was kind of like playing out at recess, you're just flying around playing football, no worries in the world. So I think that was my favorite part of the second half is, we were just out there and really just enjoying the game that we all love.
We talk about it frequently. Turnovers can be an unreliable measure, but what's more reliable is passes defended. Iowa averaged 7.2 per game. That's second most in the nation. Rob, this is the 4th time in the last 5 weeks that we've talked about Iowa piling up turnovers. This is going to keep happening.
Yeah, we sat here last week and said, is this going to keep happening? Yes, it's going to keep happening. And, we're wondering, and we asked about this a little bit earlier this week, what goes into it? And it looks like, it's preparation. There's not luck here when you talk about being able to turn teams over at the rate that Iowa's doing it. It's being in the right place at the right time. We came into this season wondering if this defensive line could get pressure on quarterbacks, could hold the edge with 3 new starters. This defensive line, I think, has been the story of this team so far this season. The growth of those guys up front, Grant, to be able to allow those guys on the 2nd and 3rd level to make plays, to me, has been the key to everything this year.
That's exactly what it is, and they're talking about complementary football.
Right.
That is the perfect vision of Kirk Ferentz and complementary football. All right, we could sing the praises of the defense all day long, but the offense turned in its best performance of the season Friday night. 2 Spencer Petras sneaks for a touchdown, a Monty Pottebaum touchdown, an Arlen Bruce touchdown, and all of that in just 1 quarter. Iowa racked up 31 points in the second quarter. That's more than they've scored in any game this season, and they needed to go just 96 yards to do that. This is the best example of what makes this team so dangerous.
Yeah, I think it was just playing team football, at least on offense. I think, over the last the 4 weeks prior, we had a lot of really good plays, but then we had a lot of plays that weren't so good. And I think the consistency and really playing team football is all it is. When 11 spots do their job, it's hard to stop us.
Did just so many good things. I don't know if I want to call it a dominant performance, but we were playing at a high level out there, and that was so good for us to see.
If that's not dominant football, I'm not really sure what is. Iowa's offense has started 25% of its drives in opponent territory, and it has the best starting field position on average in the nation, meaning the yardage totals just can't be that high. But Rob, right now, this is an offense that has been opportunistic the same way that the defense has. That's exactly what this team needs, right?
Yes, I mean, if you look at what the defense is doing and how it's setting up its offense, if the offense isn't cashing those in, then that really kind of deflates everything. But the offense is cashing in on those opportunities, and if it continues to do that, that's the complementary football that Grant talked about earlier that needs to happen. And if you watch this offense and can't see that it's getting better week to week, I'm not sure what to tell you, because it is getting better, and it's finding more consistency. We heard Spencer talk about that, finding consistency. I think this offense is becoming more consistent, making plays more consistently.
And it's the pass game that we had talked about with concern leading into the season in the early days of the season. But right now, I think that the pass has been opening up the run a little bit. And they've gotten really creative with these screen passes. And I mean, that touchdown to Laporta that was called back is another example of kind of the rhythm that this offense has found. And I think the running game will come along. There's clearly more upside for this offense, but they're in a good place right now. And while we're talking offense, perhaps the most encouraging performance of the night came from that man, Spencer Petras. The junior QB had his best statistical game as a Hawkeye, throwing for 259 yards, 3 touchdowns, and again, no interceptions. He added 2 more touchdowns on QB sneaks, and while his numbers haven't necessarily popped that way throughout the season, this was simply a continuation of the Hawkeyes' QB1 playing winning football.
The bottom line is, I mean, he's finished up 6 straight last year, and now he's got us here. So we really like what we've seen. Like the development that we've seen from him, and there's a lot of things we see in practice that not everybody else gets to see. So, I don't think anybody's surprised in our camp about, how he played tonight. The first 2 things I would say about him, he's totally committed, just so committed as a player. I talked about the defensive guys, their preparation. And the other part, clean game.
Iowa is plus 12 in turnover margin this season. That's the best in the nation, and almost as big as the defense grabbing 16 takeaways is Spencer Petras throwing just 1 interception in 5 games. Rob, I think people like me, I think about growth as being linear because I play Madden. That's not how it works in real life, but I think we've kind of seen that linear growth from Spencer Petras from his first start to the end of last season, from his first start this season to where we're at right now.
Yeah, without question. I think, he's faced a lot of heat. I mean, people, during the struggles last year, early this year, do we need a quarterback change? And he's stayed the course. And my research isn't always the best, but I look back to 1971 when teams started playing 11 games. Quarterbacks that started Iowa, Ricky Stanzi, 13 straight wins. C.J. Beathard, you remember in 2015, 12 straight wins. Spencer Petras now has 11 straight wins. I think it was Al Davis, former Raiders owner, said, just win, baby. He does. He understands what this team needs out of him to win football games. We've talked about how good this defense is, how good these special teams are. Don't make mistakes. Make the plays when they're available. That's what he's doing.
He has proven to be the right quarterback for this team. There's no conversation that can be had for the rest of this season about it. And if he's able to get the win against Penn State, we're going to talk about that going forward here. If he can add that 12th win, join that club of those guys that you were talking about, he will have earned it by the way he's improved and the way he's taken advantage of the situation that he's in. That's what he has to do.
I mean, we're trying to work hard every week, and of course every game is a big game. Like I said, it's 12 opportunities, and we train 8 months a year for this. So we feel prepared, and we're putting in a good game plan, so we're excited.
Sam Laporta tried to downplay it, but of the 6 opportunities the Hawks have had this season, this one is by far the biggest. More on the hype train for this game when we come back.
It's what you want to play for. I mean, it's fun. It's fun when the chips are on the table. That's good.
There's no pretending when it comes to this one. Yes, every win counts as one win, but no, not all games are created equal. And when it comes to the game we've got at Kinnick on Saturday, everybody knows this one's a beast. It's not just the biggest game at Kinnick since 1985. It's the biggest Big Ten game not involving Michigan or Ohio State since 1962. All of this in terms of AP rankings. The Hawks have made it clear that they do not care about the rankings, but they do know this is a monumental opportunity.
It's a great opportunity because stuff like this doesn't happen very often. You can look back to all the great Hawkeyes. They're probably going to be watching the game, so play for them. Play for they had the Tiger Hawk on at one point. Just go out there and give it your all.
It's a big deal, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think everyone on this team is excited for the opportunity, and because, like you said, this is why you play. This is why you play football, for games like this.
It's why they play. It's why we watch. It's why we cover it. Rob, you've covered about as many Hawkeye games as anybody. You've seen almost as many as Kirk Ferentz. Is this the biggest game you'll have covered at Kinnick?
I think so in hindsight, and I wrote about this in my preview. Time will tell if this game can stand the test of time. If you look back at '85, Michigan, Iowa, this season, and both go on to really good seasons, I think that makes this game that much more important, but we have to get there. And then as an example to that, back in 2006, highly ranked Iowa played highly ranked Ohio State. Last time game day was here. Did not end well for the Hawkeyes. Nobody wants to remember that game. So there's more to the going into this game. I get the hype, but we'll see if it proves that it deserved that hype over the test of the season.
See, that's the importance of an experienced reporter there knowing that. The Iowa-Penn State series has been an interesting one both in the Joe Paterno era and in the James Franklin era. It wasn't until last fall that Kirk Ferentz finally got his first win over Franklin's Nittany Lions, and while it was a fairly dominant performance for the Hawks, the previous 3 matchups were absolute nail-biters, decided by 6 points or less. They all went Penn State's way. As far as Kirk is concerned, it doesn't matter what year it is, Penn State is always going to be a tough one.
You're playing an established program. If you talk about programs that you really don't need much explanation, Penn State's in that handful of national teams. So it's a challenge when you're playing. And the one thing for sure, just like I alluded to, if you going back a long ways, if you're not ready to play, it could be embarrassing. So you better get ready to play.
A recent memory of this rivalry is more about heartbreak than embarrassment, but the Hawks did pound Penn State last year in Happy Valley. Rob, how crucial do you think it was for them to finally get that win over James Franklin's Penn State team, or does it not really matter that much?
I think, like Kirk was saying, anytime you beat an established program, whether it be, it was Penn State last year, Wisconsin last year, some of those schools that were kind of, the monkey on your back, being able to win those games gives the guys that are on the team now confidence that they can do that going forward. And I get the sense that this team is pretty confident with how it played against Penn State last year, that it can match up this year, and if it plays as well as it can win the game. Yeah,
they talked about this week, that this is a lot the same Penn State team as last year,
right.
But all those guys are back. They're a year older. They're a year better. And they certainly look like a Penn State football team. In some ways, they didn't necessarily look last year. So it's going to be a trickier version of that same game.
I'm as impressed with number 5 as anybody we've seen this year. And I say that with all due respect. We've played against some really good players so far. But their receiver's a tremendous football player. It's a real good group, but he's outstanding.
Number 5 is Jahan Dotson, and he's impressed the heck out of Kirk Ferentz. Jett Beachum explains why he's such a problem and breaks down the fearsome Penn State offense. And the Hawks returns. When you line up across from Penn State, you know there's going to be significant NFL talent, and the guy who has the full attention of this Hawkeye defense this week is senior wideout Jahan Dotson. Jett Beachum has a whole lot more in this week's Deep Dive.
With a nation-leading 16 takeaways and 12 interceptions, the Iowa defense has already cemented itself as one of the best in the nation. Now, if there are still any doubters, the Hawkeyes have a chance to silence them this Saturday when they go up against one of the best receivers in the country, Penn State's Jahan Dotson. The senior wideout was recently ranked number 8 and the top receiver overall on Mel Kiper's NFL Draft Big Board, and with good reason. Dotson leads the Big Ten in total catches and touchdowns with at least one every game this season. In fact, if you add up Dotson's stats through the first 5 games, he's put up nearly the same numbers as all of Iowa's wide receivers combined, and actually eclipses the unit in touchdowns. When asked what stands out about him as a player, Iowa head coach Kirk Ferentz simply said, everything.
I'm as impressed with number 5 as anybody we've seen this year. And I say that with all due respect. We've played against some really good players so far. But their receiver's a tremendous football player. It's a real good group, but he's outstanding. There's no wasted movement. He's concise. Everything's really just sharp. I got to think the pro guys watching him really like him because he's a really decisive player.
Having somebody like that can really force us a threat down the field is something that's pretty dangerous. And then also in the quick game, getting in open space, he's a pretty shifty receiver. So having somebody like that on the defense who can hurt us in the short pass game, also in the deep game, is something that we really have to focus on.
And Dotson is far from the only threat in this Penn State passing attack. Parker Washington and Keandre Lambert-Smith also ranked top 20 in the conference in receiving yards, and both tight ends have found the end zone. A big reason for that, senior quarterback Sean Clifford. The third-year starter is playing his best football so far in a Penn State uniform, averaging over 267 yards per game at a 67% clip to go along with 11 touchdowns. But what makes him and the rest of this Nittany Lion attack so dynamic is his dual threat ability in both scripted and unscripted situations. If you give Clifford or any Penn State player an inch, they're going to take a mile.
The quarterback is a veteran player. Can make any throw that they ask him to make, and besides that, he's a dangerous runner. They'll run with him a little bit by design, but I think maybe as dangerous as anything is if it's not there for him or something opens up, he'll just pull it down and go, and he'll throw off the run, or he'll take it and make the yardage necessary for a first down, or even more than that.
Players that you really don't want to get into space, especially on quick routes, they could definitely make a play downfield, make the big plays downfield. 50-50 balls, you have to make sure you're, fighting for the ball and make sure you're staying on top of them because, you never know what catch they might make.
Rob, obviously, Jahan Dotson is a major threat, and Sean Clifford has been pretty sharp this season, but Iowa has brought out the worst in just about every quarterback they've played, and we know that there's a downside to Sean Clifford, right?
Yeah, after the 2019 season where I thought he was really good and had a trajectory where he was on the rise, he really struggled last year. Will Levis, who's now at Kentucky, ended up supplanting him for some playing time last year. I think with him, and we talked about this last week with Tagovailoa, his ability to keep plays alive off schedule. But you have to like what Iowa did last week against Tagovailoa in that situation. Can it do it again this week? That's going to be the question because they do run some more design runs for Clifford than Maryland does for Tagovailoa, but it's his ability to keep plays alive and things breaking down in the secondary, which lead to big plays. And then, as Jett said, really good receivers and tight ends that can make plays once they get the ball in their hands. It'll be incumbent upon Iowa to make Sean Clifford uncomfortable. When you make him uncomfortable, he has a tendency to make some mistakes.
Iowa's defense has been among the biggest stories in all of college football this season, but the Penn State defense has plenty to brag about too. They're a unit that's second in efficiency in the Big Ten, only behind Iowa. They've got 7 interceptions, and they allow just 4.3 yards per play, which is also second in the Big Ten to Iowa.
Like you said, they're very talented, and that's really the biggest thing that pops out is that, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. So it's important for every position on offense to know that.
Petras would add that because of the talent on Penn State's defense, there are throws that he can't get away with this week that maybe he could against somebody else. Rob, the metrics say this is the best defense the Hawkeyes have played this season. What does a successful outing look like against the Nittany Lions on Saturday?
I think you go with the same recipe that you've used all year. Don't make mistakes. Don't make mistakes against this defense because that gives Penn State an ability to maybe play with a short field and maybe have an advantage that way. I think these teams are very similar in what they try to do. They rely on defense to set the offense up. You can't allow mistakes to Penn State's defense to set up their offense.
Now that it's all laid out, it's time for some predictions. Who's winning this gigantic battle when Eye on the Hawks comes back?
I know my family, they've been texting me since like Saturday, like, oh man, you guys playing Penn State, it's gonna be 3 versus 4, It's been kind of crazy. My phone's definitely been blown up a little bit from my family members about how crazy this game is gonna be. But I've been trying to tell them like, listen. We still gotta play the game. I still gotta kind of focus up here. I can't be too excited.
Listen. So much hype around this game, players have to tell their families to chill. It's officially prediction time. ESPN's Football Power Index gives the Hawkeyes a 59% chance to win. That's actually even better odds than it gave them last week at Maryland. Iowa opened as a 3-point favorite, but the early movement on that line has gone Penn State's way. Rob, we were split on this one before the season. I picked a loss here. You picked a win. Sticking with it?
I'm going to stick with it. I think ESPN's index is starting to buy into the Hawkeyes a little bit. You can tell from the percentages, as you said, between the Maryland game last week and this Penn State game. We've seen in 2017 and 2019 great environments in Kinnick for this game. Loud, raucous environments. Didn't help Iowa win those games. Keep it up. The third time's a charm, because I think that's going to be one of the differences this Saturday is that home crowd cheering Iowa on, coming out of that tunnel, because I think this is a toss-up type game. I think Iowa wins, say 20-17. I think it's a defensive game.
I think it is a toss-up, like you said, but all of the edges in a toss-up game that you want, Iowa has here. And I know it might sound silly, but for me, the fact that they did beat Penn State last year, that these guys on this Iowa team beat those guys on that Penn State team, and that they know that they can do that and are now going to be in this friendly environment is the edge. I think I'm going to say 24-23. I think it's going to be really close. I think it's going to be an insane game. I've been saying we're going to have close games every week, and then they've been blowing people out, but I just don't think that's possible this time around. If it is, we are talking about a college football playoff team.
Definitely.
So big game, big stakes. That is it for Week 6 of Eye on the Hawks. We'll be right back here next week with a recap of this massive game and a preview of Iowa's attempt to avenge its first of its 2 losses from 2020. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful weekend.